Alrighty, guys, how's it going? Hank Indictor here on episode number 4 of Hitting for the Cycle, and as always, I am joined by the one, the only, John Czech. John, how's it going?
Hank, brother, good to see you. We got some stuff to talk about this week. Lots of trades going down, deadlines near. Ohtani's still an Angel. We got some stuff today.
Oh, do we ever? And not only that, but we have our first guest ever since joining this network, and he's actually a guy that I have talked to in previous years, which I have done this show. His name is Brady Reuter. He is a hardcore Baltimore Orioles fan, but before we get into that, obviously, we got to do the plugs. You please don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at HFTC ETB. And, of course, follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And, of course, please don't forget to follow our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. And, of course, please make sure to follow the website, etbpodcast.com, for great blogs and more information as well. And I believe I may or may not be working on a blog at the moment about a certain hitter who I think should be in the Hall of Fame, who may or may not be in the intro of what you just saw. But in any event, John, really looking forward to doing this episode. And without further ado, let's bring on our resident Baltimore Orioles expert / superfan, Brady Reuter. Brady, how's it going?
Hey, Hank, John. I got to say it's been a great couple of months for Orioles baseball and just for baseball in general. You know, trade deadline's coming up. We just had the All-Star game and should be an exciting second half into the postseason. I got to say I am excited.
Yeah, no, me too. There's a lot of great baseball that we are going to be looking forward to, and we will definitely get to the Orioles shortly. But first, we've got a few other topics to discuss, and I think the first big news that we should be discussing is Shohei Ohtani apparently is staying with the Los Angeles Angels. According to the reports, the Angels are not willing to move on for him. And in fact, Artie Moreno, as he has pretty much shown with some moves that we're going to be getting into shortly, is pretty much trying to push for that playoff spot for the LA Angels. And I'm going to give my brief 2 cents about this. I don't know if I'm happy about this move. I mean, I know they're technically on the doorstep of a playoff spot, but I don't know. I'm not quite happy. I would have liked to have seen him play for a real team. But John, let me start with you. What was going into your head when you saw the rumors that the Angels are not willing to move Shohei Ohtani?
I didn't know if I actually was going to believe that they weren't going to trade him because of just how strong the possibility was of him going, because the Angels were mildly hot coming out of the break. They had beat up on the Yankees. But it made all the sense in the world to finally deal him. They're not that good of a team. They're a team that even if they were to make the playoffs, they would get bounced pretty quick. They're not anything that's going to challenge for even making it to a championship series. You have finally a chip that you could trade, that when you went to trade him, you're literally talking about your team's top 5 prospects to get. You could potentially rebuild your team the right way, what they could have did before they signed Mike Trout to that extension way back when. But nope, Artie Moreno was vehemently denying it. He came out and said he doesn't know why those rumors were flying, and the revenue that Shohei Ohtani makes for the team, he wasn't getting rid of him, and they made a trade yesterday. The only thing I'll say is the Tigers are making Moreno look a little bit smarter because they just swept the Tigers 3 games, and they're moving a little bit closer to that final wild card spot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not necessarily surprised that this happened because at the end of the day, we know Artie Moreno is probably going to be desperate for a playoff spot considering all the backlash that he is getting. But at the same time, you and I have had our fair share of criticisms about not trading Shohei Ohtani and him wasting talents. And I stand by my comments, by the way, on one of my previous episodes. I still believe that man should be in jail, but that's neither here nor there. Brady, let's get your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in a lot of agreement with you, John. It's interesting because I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later, but Lucas Giolito is actually acquired from Chicago, as well as Ronaldo Lopez. So I think it's just reinforcing Artie Moreno's win now mentality. And unfortunately, I don't see it paying off. I don't see the Angels, to be honest with you, finishing higher than 4th place at the end of the year. I just think that, especially with Anthony Rendon having a myriad of either injuries or off-field issues with fans in Oakland, I just don't see the Angels having any sort of consistency. And with Mike Trout being out, I really think Ohtani is going to be gone after this year. And I just, I get it. He wants to win now, but I think at some point you got to blow it up. I mean, look at the Orioles, in 2018, it happened to us. At some point, Artie Moreno's just got to start over.
That, or I think he needs to get his hearing aids checked, as John said in another episode that we did.
And I think this might also further reinforce that he's might not sell the Angels. Like, he was going to sell the team, and now he keeps Shohei Ohtani to make one last playoff push with him on the roster as an Angel, because, I think we all agree there's no chance in hell he's coming back as an Angel, especially if they miss the playoffs. I think at this point in time, the money factor isn't going to be an issue. I think Shohei wants to win because wherever he goes, they're going to pay him a shit ton of money. But maybe he's not going to even sell the Angels now. Who knows? This might just reinforce that he's there for the long term. If you're an Angels fan, that means you're probably not going to win for a minute, even being over 500, but you're a mediocre over 500.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, no, I do not envy that fan base whatsoever. Although, can I just say this, though? There is one way that I could possibly see him staying with the Angels. If he decides to pull a Mike Trout and accept a deal with the Devil.
Yeah. You literally have a guy that was one of the best players of all time for a 10-year span and went to one playoff series. Is Shohei that stupid, and he wants to win as bad as he does, to do the same thing Trout did? Because he's going to get paid that money regardless, wherever he goes. So, I don't know, man. That's a big ask, and that's a big risk, especially when you know how ownership is there. With Moreno being flaky, is he going to sell the team, not sell the team? The players they get haven't been very, very good. Like, instead of going out and getting pitching, they get Anthony Rendon, and he spent more time on the IL. I think him, Trout, and Ohtani have played in less than 60 games together as a 3. It's insane.
Well, anyways, yeah, I think that's pretty much true. But now let's start to get into a little bit of our teams that are relevant going on. And I'm going to start by talking about Aaron Judge. According to reports, there is a possibility that this may be the weekend that Aaron Judge finally returns off the IL. And look, if you're a Yankee fan, I think the big word that you're going to feel, and yes, I am pretty much speaking for myself here, is relief, because, you're finally going to be seeing the guy in the lineup that pretty much makes the Yankees relevant. And, I think if he can stay healthy, it's probably going to help the Yankees go on a playoff push, because let's face it, the only reason that this team is above 500 is because of his presence in the lineup. You look at what happened ever since his injury, the Yankees went on a really, really bad slide. And if I'm not mistaken, the only series I can think of off the top of my head that the Yankees have won since Aaron Judge's injury were the A's series, the one where Domingo threw the perfect game, and sweeping the Royals at Yankee Stadium. And you guys pretty much know how horrible those two teams are. So, in other words, if the Yankees won 2 series and they came against the Orioles and the A's, the Royals and the A's, then did they even happen at all? And let's not forget, they also lost series to the Cubs, the Rockies, and they got swept by the Angels. Yep. Guys, while I'm glad that he's back and I'm excited to see him in the lineup, I just the fact that this team is just so mid prevents me from being as excited as I should be. And I don't mean to sound like a Debbie Downer, but that's just the way the Yankees are. And if you guys saw my angry rant after leaving the game where we got boat raced by the Mets, you should know that I have often said the Yankees are literally the definition of insanity. They try the same strategy over and over again, expect different results, but nothing ever fucking works with this team. That's all I got to say.
Hank, do you think it's weird timing that Judge is finally coming back like a couple days before the trade deadline? That's when they decided he was healthy enough. That way, if they add a piece, they can be like, hey, Aaron Judge is back. Now we got our guy back and our lineup's going to roll.
Yeah, very weird timing, because what have I often said about the Steinbrenners and Brian Cashman? Well, really more Hal Steinbrenner, but Brian Cashman's certainly not innocent either. You guys have seen me rip on him a good amount of times. Steinbrenner probably wants to make money. Putting him in the lineup will probably improve their chances. And now it's Hal probably taking whatever optimistic pills he has and trying to convince himself that with Aaron Judge back, the Yankees are a championship contender. And those drugs will probably drive him so insane that he's going to make a stupid move thinking it'll put the Yankees one step over the top, when the fact of the matter is they're not even close to that. And, obviously there is one more thing I got to mention. And, John, you know exactly where I'm going with this. Chicken tender buckets, baby. Got to get that playoff revenue.
Hey, whoever puts butts in seats, you got to drive up those ticket prices. So Aaron Judge, who else? That's the guy that you want.
What do they call those, Hank, behind the dugout? The legend seats or behind the plate? Legend seats or championship seats?
Yeah, legend seats. It's so depressing every time I watch games and I see them so empty with nobody there, especially because I remember at the old stadium, you never really had this problem. In fact, when I was younger, you could go to a game and watch batting practice up close, but if you were lucky enough that nobody had that seat, you could sit there as long as security didn't really come up to your section and whatnot. Nowadays, that wouldn't fly, especially as our friend Brian Danoff pointed out in that YouTube video he made many moons ago. And probably when Yankee Stadium was 4 or 5 years old, I think was when he made that.
Yeah, I just think the timing is just oddly weird that the deadline is right there, and now Judge all of a sudden is good enough to come back. And I think it's setting up Cashman to make a move for a bat to try to help out in the outfield, just because Aaron Judge is back, and now we got our guy back. We're not going to score three runs a game anymore. We're going to go back up to 5.5. So I don't know. I just think the timing is kind of weird and directly coincides with the trade deadline on purpose.
By the way, I should mention, there are every now and then there are masochists that would pay $5,000 in those stupid legend seats.
Yeah, no thanks.
Imagine if they went there for a Yankees Marlins game in May. The biggest waste of $5,000 in the world.
Shoot,
I mean, unless you're Marlins,
man, for that much money,
I mean, unless you're Marlins, man. Then if you're Marlins, man, you're having the time of your life. But
well, as long as Jeter's not the owner of the Marlins, then he's having a great time.
Yeah.
I don't really think Jeter was as much of the problem, but that's a discussion for another day. But in any event, let's get to the MLB trades. And we've had a good amount of them to start off. But let me start off with one trade that I thought was pretty baffling, to say the least. The LA Dodgers traded Noah Syndergaard to the Cleveland Guardians for Ahmed Rosario. And I'm just going to say this right here, right now. There's no question the Dodgers won this trade. I'm surprised you were even able to, given the circumstances, I'm shocked that you were even able to get rid of Noah Syndergaard for something worth value at all, because I don't know if you've seen him pitch, but he is definitely a shell of himself from his days with the New York Mets. And Brady, what do you think Ahmed Rosario can bring to the table for the Los Angeles Dodgers?
Well, I'll be honest, Hank, I don't know too much about Ahmed Rosario, but I do see Syndergaard had a 7.16 ERA, which obviously is not getting it done for the Dodgers. Kind of shocked too. I'm kind of thinking Cleveland will make a run at winning the very weak NL Central. But we just saw the Dodgers a couple of weeks ago here in Baltimore, and they still, despite having their issues, at least competing with winning first place, they're still in front of San Francisco and Arizona. So, I think Rosario, also, how about Kike Hernandez coming back to his former team with the Dodgers? That kind of shocked me. It just seemed like, what is Boston doing? But anyway, again, sidetracked. It just seems like Rosario provides some more depth with their infield and, add a little bit of athleticism too. And I think he'll be right there and helping the clubhouse just make that extra step just to fend off the Arizona D-backs, surprisingly Arizona D-backs, and the San Francisco Giants to win the NL West for, it seems like a 10th time in a row now.
Yeah, no, John, I have a feeling you and I were pretty much in the same mindset when this trade went down.
It makes no sense that they took a guy that wasn't bad last year. Last year, if you look at his numbers, he was above in a league average OPS plus. He had a 106 OPS plus. He hit 283, had 11 homers, 71 RBIs. And then this year, he's having a down year compared to last year, 89 OPS plus, so he's 11% worse than the league average. His slugging has fallen from 715, from 403 to 369. He's only got 3 bombs this year. But I think the biggest thing was, if you look, the Dodgers have had absolutely no luck with infielders this year, so much so that Mookie Betts has been played shortstop for a little bit. He's been playing some second base. They went and, after Gavin Lux got hurt, went and got Miguel Rojas. And Miguel Rojas is, he's an okay hitter, but he's not a guy that you're going to give 162 games to go out there and play shortstop to. Gavin Lux getting hurt really screwed them this year because they wanted to see what they had in him. And you look at Ahmed Rosario, he's really not that good defensively. At least this year he wasn't. He's already got 15 errors. He's actually a minus WAR player, 0.9 minus WAR, so he's almost hurting their team more than a league average player would. But if you're the Dodgers, they have something about that franchise, man. They know how to get the best out of their players. They're like the Rays, where they just know how to wave that magic wand and get something out of it. And you think about it, you get a guy who's going to play shortstop, even if he hasn't been playing good defensively. You get a guy that's going to play a shortstop that's sub 30, and you traded him for a pitcher that's not even on a major league roster right now. He was in AAA getting his ass rocked again. In a couple of starts down with the Dodgers AAA squad, he had an ERA over 5. Noah Syndergaard doesn't throw 99.8 anymore consistently for his average. He throws 93. He doesn't have that same kind of slider that's 97 anymore. His changeup's okay. He went from a guy that I can vividly remember. There was a game in 2015 I went to. It was Noah Syndergaard versus Justin Verlander at Comerica Park. I was in the bleachers. I'm not shitting you. I was in the bleachers, and you could hit Noah Syndergaard hitting the mitt. From the bleachers, he used to throw that hard. The fact that the Dodgers were able to trade a pitcher that they made up a bullshit injury about, saying he had blisters because he was getting his ass rocked so much, for a starting shortstop, man, what a deal for them.
I almost have to wonder if Andrew Friedman is essentially a snake oil salesman for making that trade.
Yeah, he was selling him oceanfront property in Montana. That's exactly what he did.
Yeah, no, and look, even though I'm a Yankee fan, obviously I've seen my fair share of Noah Syndergaard starts with me living in New York and him pitching for the Mets, but I have to say it's pretty sad how far he's fallen. So, John, you mentioned him getting rocked in the minor leagues. That's not even the only, sad part. You guys know this is now going to be the 4th different team he will have played for within the past few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember his time with the Angels didn't go too well either.
Yeah, Perry paid him a lot of money for a short amount of time. Then that didn't last long. He got traded to the Phillies, and he wasn't even the Phillies' number 3 starter. I don't think. If I remember correctly, I think he was their 4th starter during the playoffs.
He was in the bullpen.
Yeah, jeez.
Yeah, he wasn't even a starter. He was in the bullpen because his stuff is diminished.
And then if you go to the Dodgers and and you have to go to the minor leagues, that pretty much says all you really need to know about his decline.
Yeah. The fact that you could trade a guy for someone who's a major league regular, even having a down year defensively and with the stick, but the hit tool is still in there for a guy that's not even on a major league roster. But you got to look at it from the Cleveland side a little bit too. Bieber just got transferred to the 60-day IL. Tristan McKenzie is pretty much done for the entirety of the year. And it's not like Cleveland hasn't been able to do some reclamation projects and not be able to turn some guys around and help some guys, get back to what, they potentially could be. Cleveland produces a lot of good starting pitching. Cleveland is, they are a pitching factory there. They've made a lot of good starters. They rarely ever trade for starting pitching help. They usually get it all from their minor leagues. So it's very rare that they go outside of the org to even get starting pitching.
True, but again, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think that's actually a good point there, but at the same time, you know what it pretty much feels like.
Yep.
Feels like a Band-Aid.
Yep.
And probably a Hello Kitty Band-Aid at that.
Not even one with a Thor hammer, it's just a Hello Kitty one.
Yeah, basically. Another trade that happened, Brady, you mentioned it a little bit. The Red Sox ended up trading Kike Hernandez to the LA Dodgers, and I believe the Red Sox got 2 relief pitching prospects in return. My thoughts about that trade, I mean, I think it really benefits the Dodgers more, but at the same time, the Red Sox pretty much had a crowded infield. Somebody had to go, and I think Kike Hernandez was pretty expandable, and now you're putting him on the Dodgers, and like we alluded to with Ahmed Rosario, you're also adding some infield depth right there. And not only that, this is a guy who's been proven to do well in the postseason. So I think it's probably solid for LA to be getting a guy like him back.
Oh, yeah. And, returning to where he won the World Series in 2020. So obviously he had a lot of good relationships with, the manager and a lot of the other players there, Mookie, right? So, yeah, to get another former Red Sox going to LA, what's up with that? So, also, I think might be lost in this is Trevor Story is making his return with Boston as well.
Yes.
Just kind of makes you wonder, what are the Red Sox planning? Are they going to buy? Are they going to sell? Because, they're very similar to the Yankees and where they stand. Yes, they have a decent record, but in the AL East, right now it's going to be some progress they have to make in order to make it up to a playoff spot. So we'll see what the next couple of days bring for what Boston does. But, infield depth is always important. And as you mentioned, Hank, they were not getting that production out of their infield for the most part, other than Freddie Freeman, of course. So I think having another guy who's proven who can play a couple of different spots, which should be good for them.
And
my take is short, simple, and sweet. Depth. That's all this is about. Red Sox have needed some relief pitching. Maybe one of these guys comes up and helps them in the next year or two. It's just depth, move both sides.
Yeah, I agree. And the last move that really happened of notoriety was the Minnesota Twins ended up acquiring Dylan Floro from the Marlins in exchange for Jorge Lopez. I would say this is a move that's probably Minnesota's attempt to try to improve on their bullpen.
Yeah, I would probably say so. Jorge Lopez, of course, I knew as an Orioles fan was the guy that we traded last year for what came to be Yennier Cano with the O's. Lopez this year unfortunately struggled. It looks like right now he's got an ERA of 5.09 with only 3 saves. Dylan Floro has a little bit better of a go at it with Miami, a 4.54 ERA with 7 saves. So Minnesota, they play in a weak division, so it might help them. They got a good closer there in Minnesota already, so Floro could be an extra utility guy or a guy in the 8th inning maybe to get some saves as well to give the other guys some rest. But yeah, it'll be. We'll see who wins that trade in the long run.
I think this is like kind of par for the course for Lopez though, because Lopez has pitched for a lot of teams. Before he pitched for the Orioles, he just had that one real standout year last year, and the Orioles were smart and they cashed it in and ended up getting Cano out of it. And a lot of people were pissed that the Orioles sold because this was their closer, and then all of a sudden you get Cano and Bautista steps up, and then you look on the Marlins side of it. They're like, well, Luis Ariz worked all right for us, so let's try another Minnesota Twin out down here and see how it works. So Twins looking for a depth move, I guess. Maybe they're like, well, we'll trade you garbage for garbage, and we'll figure out which one with some Febreze smells less crappy. So,
John, do fish eat Twinkies?
what's that?
Do the fish eat Twinkies down there?
I don't know. You tell me.
I guess only time will tell now. But yeah, it's just funny. It seems like they just love trading with each other, So maybe you can throw in a package of Twinkies while they're at it, feed it to the Marlins. I bet Marlins man would enjoy that.
Yeah.
He probably has too much money to even think about Twinkies. But in any event, Brady, I think it's time we talked about your Baltimore Orioles. And let me start off right off the bat by asking you. So obviously we talked for a bit of time, like over the offseason, about the Orioles, about your expectations. You pretty much had a sense that they were ready to start competing coming into the season. But are you surprised that as of right now, at the day we are recording this, the Orioles, if I am not mistaken, as I put up the standings, are 1.5 games up in first place and only 3 games up in the all-important loss column? And in addition to that, they also have the best record in the American League. On a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised are you that this is the case?
Well, I'd probably say about a 7. So I did think the O's were going to be a competing team for the playoffs this year. Now, if you had told me they would have been the best record in the American League, I would have thought, okay, everything must have gone perfect in order for that to happen. And that's almost been the case. They've fun fact. So since Adley Rutschman got called up on May 21st last year, they have not been swept in a 2 or 3 game series. Now, that's a streak of 72 series in a row, which ties the longest since during World War II, which is kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. There's been a lot of close wins that they've had, a lot of 1 and 2 run wins. So honestly, when the Rays got off to that hot start, it just seemed like nobody could touch them. But little by little, the O's were slowly doing their thing and just winning some games. And lo and behold, we caught them at the right time. We just took 3 or 4 in Tampa Bay and just took over first place. So obviously it's still July. Today is July 27th. So we still got 2 months to go. But yeah, I couldn't be really any more excited for where we're going and what we could be, accomplishing, especially 2 years ago, right? We lost 110 games. So just a big turnaround. And it just shows you that rebuilds can suck. John, I'm sorry, the Tigers might just be just a couple years away, but it's just you need the right management, and you have to get lucky too. Like you have to have guys like Yennier Cano. It kind of has a breakthrough first half of the season, or somebody like Cedric Mullins that had a 30-30 season after struggling. And then of course you have to draft well, Adley obviously, and Gunnar Henderson this year, who is he started off rough but has come on strong and has carried this team at times too. So yeah, things can change, but that's why for a mid-market team like the O's, you just have to do things right. And I believe with Sig Mejdal, Mike Elias, they know how to develop players and how to draft, and that's what it takes to win.
I'm going to pat myself on the back. I don't know if you watched a couple weeks ago. I said the Orioles were winning the East, and this was when Tampa Bay was in first place, and I was right because I believed in the Orioles since the first month and a half in the season after Tampa Bay got hot. And then they started losing a little bit at home. And then all of a sudden the Orioles started taking off. I could see some chinks in Tampa Bay's armor. My only question for you is how do you feel that your franchise put my franchise in a rebuild after sweeping us in the playoffs in 2014? What do you got to say for yourself on that one? Mr. Get Delman Young, and then he hits a bases clearing double. And then we go in a rebuild since then?
all I say is you had 3 Cy Young pitchers: Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, David Price. So, hey, I don't know how you don't beat Bud Norris, right, Chris Tillman, but it is what it is. But
That 2014 Tigers team is my most hated Tigers team because everyone thinks that team was good. That team was not that good. They had one of the shittiest bullpens, and their offense was garbage. That's one team I can't stand. Everyone thought they were going to do good. You can go back on my YouTube channel. I'm not going to plug it here because we're on Empty the Bench, baby. This is where we're at. But you can go back on my YouTube channel and go back in 2014, and I predicted the Tigers were going to get swept by the Orioles. So, but I love that.
A few
honest
guys
God,
from Detroit.
You guys got so many fun players to watch. I love, and then you got Herjad still on the horizon. Jackson Holiday's 19, already in freaking Double-A.
Oh, yeah. And he hit a home run. Already. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see him do well.
Oh, if I'm Hank over here, I'm shitting my pants a little bit. The O's are gonna be here for a minute.
John, if I'm being honest, I've been shitting my pants since last year with regards to the Orioles because I already pretty much saw a good amount of flashes of what they could do. I mean, after all, they won Brady, correct me if I'm wrong, they won 89 games, but they just missed out on that wild card spot.
83, but I mean, they were close.
Or 83. They had a winning season.
Yeah, in September, they faded a little bit, but Hank, this might make you mad, but I do remember that last series against the Yankees where a lot of people were just wanting the O's to throw cookies to Aaron Judge. Like, no, we're going to win and we're going to play hard. We're not going to give Aaron Judge this record. He's going to have to earn it. And, it did give me a little bit of satisfaction to see the fans get mad when we won 2 of 3. But anyway, that's last year. So with the
I remember I was at one of those games.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. But, hey, okay. I was listening to your video, Hank, and I think you have a good point. I was watching, you were saying without Aaron Judge, the Yankees would not have made the playoffs last year. And this year, it's almost looking like that. So, the Yankees are still the Yankees. They're always going to be that evil empire, as we know in Baltimore, right? Going back to the Jeffrey Mayer, 1996, reaching over center field. It still lives in O's fans' minds for years, before I was born. And that's still what we talk about. So, yeah, the O's are looking good, but we always got to have that little brother mentality, especially, growing up in Southern Pennsylvania, right? There was a lot of Yankees fans that I would hang out with, go to the O's games, and I would have to deal with the Yankees chants. And, it'll be nice this time around. Got a series coming up in Baltimore. I would expect the Baltimore faithful to show up big, and here's some good "Let's Go" O's chants. So, all I can say, Hank, it's going to be a fun couple of months. The season's not over. Got a long way to go yet.
Come get Erod back. Take him back and give us something out of your farm system.
Oh, yeah. No, I was actually, John, just thinking about that. He's one of the guys that I want the O's to get back.
Yeah, you can have.
Back to that 2014 season, right? Andrew Miller and Hank, you saw him later on in 2015.
Yep.
Yeah, Erod, him and Gray Rod, both those guys, the Rod brothers, get that pitching rotation where it needs to be.
Yeah, come get them. Your farm system's stacked. We need that. Come get them.
Yeah, no. Evil. I'm funny you should say Evil Empire because even though, as much as I love this team, I haven't really been calling them the Evil Empire since I want to say maybe 2009, and even then, you could argue the Evil Empire died either November 4th, 2001, or maybe October 20th, 2004. One of those 2 dates. Take your pick. But no, in any event, I'm really excited for the series this weekend, and this is probably got to be the first big Yankees-Orioles series we've seen that we're looking at since I don't know, probably the 2012, 2014 seasons, I want to say. But and we got a good pitching matchup tomorrow too. We've got Gray Rod going up against Garrett Cole, and should be interesting to see how the Yankees can do with Garrett Cole on the hill against the first place Orioles.
Right. Yeah. Hank. Yeah, you're right. So Garrett Cole only faced the Orioles once back on May 23rd. He struggled a bit. He had 5 runs over 5 innings and 6 hits, but unfortunately, that was a game where Aaron Judge took deep Felix Bautista in the 9th, and he was end up losing. So Grayson Rodriguez, he's making, of course, his return. He got sent down to AAA. It was really Corey Seager and the Texas Rangers just sent him out of Baltimore that game. That was back in May. That was a bad game when he played the Rangers. But since being called from AAA Norfolk, he was actually the minor league pitcher of the month for June for the Tides. So he pitched on July 17th, gave up 4 runs, over 5 innings and 7 hits, struck out 4 and walked 2. And then he pitched against Tampa Bay, where I watched that game, and he gave up 2 runs over 5 2/3. So it just seems like lately he's been trending in the right direction, but it's if whether he can get out of that 6th inning, without giving up that big hit. And unfortunately, I believe it was Yandy Diaz last week, just on a 2-strike pitch, I believe, with 2 outs. Grayson could not get through that inning, and that's kind of when the Rays started to climb back into that game, and eventually the Rays tied it. So it'll just be big for Grayson to get through 5 to 6 and keep a lead and just put away hitters.
He was walking a lot of guys, wasn't he? Because he faced the Tigers twice where he got sent down. If I remember correct, he was having a lot of issues with command, and he didn't really have strikeout stuff. His changeup wasn't working like how they thought it was going to be, because he has a great changeup. But yeah. I know he faced the Tigers once at Comerica, and then the second time in Baltimore, I think he only gave up like 2 runs over 5.
Yeah, his control at the beginning was tough. Like, especially listening to Ben McDonald on Masson, he had a lot of good pitches. He got ahead of a lot of guys, but just couldn't put him away with that last pitch that you need. So I think that the changeup for Grayson would be his put away pitch, but his fastball was hitting about 99, a couple starts ago. So he's built up that velocity. It's just, can he put him away with a good changeup or a good slider? And that's going to be, I think, the difference in the game right there. And, if Aaron Judge comes back, well, he better be on his A game. I'll say that.
Yeah, and I think it definitely – the thing that I'm convinced would make it help the Yankees for Aaron Judge to get back, I'm really convinced after watching Stanton and Rizzo struggle this year, his presence alone pretty much improves them, because those guys get better pitches to hit, and I think it really changes the whole dynamic of this offense, and that's why I was pretty much ready to pull a Kevin Brown on this wall right over here when I heard the news. So, yeah, I gotta say, looking at the other pitching matchups, though, that's where it gets a little dicey for yours truly, because you've got Clark Schmidt throwing in the second game, who he had a rough start to the year, but he's gotten a little bit better, and it's weird. In some of the games he's won, he's pitched badly, but the Yankees have won in spite of him this year. But yet, in the other games when he's pitched better, it's because of the lack of run support. But generally speaking, Clark Schmidt is kind of a mystery box this year, should I say. And then in the third game, you've got Luis Severino pitching, and I am not confident whatsoever, because he has gotten absolutely lit up so many times, and it has been pretty brutal, to say the least. So I'm pretty much just going to knock on wood right here and hope for the best from Sevy.
Yeah, we'll see, Hank. So Tyler Wells pitches he's the other pitcher going against Clark Schmidt on Saturday. And then it's Dean Kramer, who's actually had a pretty good win-loss record despite a 4.5 ERA on Sunday night. So, Wells for a little while was actually the American League leader in WHIP. He's tailed off a little bit. I think, unfortunately for Wells, he hasn't seemed to give up a lot of walks or hits, but it's been the home runs. I believe the Rays game he pitched last weekend, he only gave up 1 hit, but it was a 2-run bomb that ended up tying the game or something like that to I believe, Diaz. So sometimes it's just when you give up the hits, they're the big ones that hurt you. So for Wells, it's just, if he gives up the home run to Aaron Judge, hopefully it's a solo home run, and that's all that happens. That's all I can say.
Are the Yankees on the road or at Baltimore?
I believe we're in Camden.
Yeah, it's in Baltimore. It's actually the first time in quite some time that the O's play on Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN, so it'll be exciting. It's funny. It seems like you get, teams that are probably a little bit above average, sometimes decent, a little bit below average, that get a lot of national attention. And the O's, there they are, they're scrappy, just chipping away, chirping away, I guess, as you want to say for the Birds. And now they finally get a little bit of national spotlight. So all they can do is just take advantage of it, right? I think draw more interest in the team, and that'll help them for years to come. So it'll be a good game. I'm excited. A whole good series this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. Pretty much. I want to say I'm looking forward to it, but at the same time, given the way the Yankees have been, and while I'm hoping Judge's return makes things interesting, I personally don't like the pitching matchups. That's just me, especially with your lineup. And the other thing that scares me is if these games get pretty close, I don't like the Yankees' chances because, even though our bullpen has been a strong spot, really mostly it's been Clay Holmes that has been the strength of the bullpen, and to a certain degree, Michael King too. Cano has been absolutely filthy.
Yeah. Now, lately, he struggled a bit in the month of July. He actually lost us a game against Philadelphia, but overall, still a really good year. He was an all-star. I think it's just this year, the first couple of months, he was on a ridiculous pace that I don't think it could be repeated, where it was like the first 2 months, he didn't allow a base runner to reach base. It was something ridiculous, like the first 22 innings. But I think where the O's struggle is their middle relief, where if their starter only gets 4.5 innings, that's where they can be beat because I think that's their weakest link. Now, the O's have already made a move to help a little bit with their bullpen. So, of course, I'm talking about, as you talked about, Hank and John, Shintaro Fujinami coming from Oakland for Easton Lucas. Now, he struggled his first couple of outings against the Rays, but the other day against Philadelphia, he was solid. He pitched 2 innings, struck out 3 batters, and didn't walk a guy. The walks were an issue against Tampa. So, I think the O's are not done at the trade deadline. I would love for them to acquire Dylan Cease of the Chicago White Sox, and he would be under control for a couple more years too, to help with Grayson Rodriguez. Also, Hank, you know him, David Robertson, longtime New York Yankees and now New York Met. I think he could also be a really good boost when Cano maybe needs an off day or Bautista needs an off day. And, as a veteran, knows the Yankees really well. So I think, Mike Elias has been set on Masson. He's not done. He's making a lot of phone calls and really entertaining what we could do. So definitely looking forward to more bullpen help before the trade deadline passes.
Yeah, no, I think I'm very interested to see what Mike Elias, is that his name? Mike Elias does to beef up the Orioles with regards to the trade deadline. We'll see what kind of pitchers that they could get to. I mean, because while your pitching rotation hasn't necessarily been like stars, so to speak, it's definitely been competitive enough to keep you games, and having that lineup has been huge for sure.
Yeah, I know my big concern is other than Kyle Gibson, who was in the World Series last year, all these guys are young where they haven't necessarily pitched this deep in a season as an everyday starter. And I think eventually they're just going to wear out and not make it to, be their best in October. So that's why I think a starter like John has mentioned, Eduardo Rodriguez, who only has less than 100 innings but is having a really good year, or Dylan Cease with Detroit. I just think another guy in that rotation, get a veteran and a guy that can eat innings for you and be really good too. So that's my biggest concern. And then with Bautista, it seems like almost every night now he has to carry this bullpen on his back and just lead them to victory. But at some point you can't play him every night. But it just seems like the O's are always in a one-run game, and it can never be easy for us. So, my uncle was actually telling me, he actually has gone through a bit of heart issues, but I was like, oh, well, these O's give us all heart issues every night with this bullpen. So we'll see what happens,
Yeah, for sure. And last but not least, I think this was definitely going to be something to watch for sure. And Brady, may the best man win. And I'm sure you and I will be texting during some of these games, if possible, our opinions. But I think the last topic I want to get to before we end the show, obviously I got to talk about the Hall of Fame weekend. And as you guys know, I'm pretty much somebody that is an absolute fiend when it comes to baseball history. It's not just the Yankees, but pretty much any player and any legend. If you've seen a lot of the stuff I've shared on my Facebook page, it's a lot of pictures of some good legends. And one of my favorite weekends is the Hall of Fame weekend because I always love seeing the players give their speeches. Scott Rowland's speech in particular was absolutely amazing. I love that he talked about his background and his family, and seeing Fred McGriff get into was pretty cool. I always thought Fred McGriff was pretty much an underrated player. I mean, consistently hitting 20 home runs, and he's one of only 8 players, I believe, to have 200 home runs in both leagues, believe it or not. And that was pretty cool. And Scott Rowland, personally, is a guy that I've often thought was definitely deserving of the Hall of Fame. He's one of the greatest third basemen of all time. I mean, 8 Gold Gloves. And the fact that he spent his whole entire MLB career at that position, that's pretty rare.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, he was a bit of an advanced stats darling a little bit, because I don't think he would have got in if it was like the same kind of viewpoints that people held the Hall of Fame standard to for the longest time. They would have looked at guys like Mike Schmidt and Brooks Robinson and compared all their numbers, and Rowland's numbers don't really compare to some of those guys. But you take in like his defense, his on base percentage, all that other stuff. I think that's how he got it. I mean, he had a career 490 slug, a career 855 OPS, a career OPS plus of 122, a 70 WAR overall. One of the greatest defensive third basemen of all time. But like I said, I think the way they look at the numbers now, and kind of like the new young blood that's come into the BBWAA, it's really helped his case for making it in the Hall of Fame, because I don't think he would have made it if it was like 20 years ago, with how they used to look at statistics and holding guys like 500 homers and 3,000 hits. But it was good to see. I mean, he's definitely deserving. I would have put him in the Hall of Fame just based off of everything overall and how consistent his number was, because he really wasn't a compiler guy either. Like, he was pretty consistent all throughout his career as well. So he wasn't like one of those guys that just held on and padded the stats when he was like a real crappy player toward the back end. But definitely deserving. And Fred McGriff as well. Like, Fred McGriff, he got the short end of the stick. A lot of people looked at his numbers and were like, well, he always played in good lineups. He was never like the guy that carried the team. And I always thought that was a bullshit take, because if you're a good player, you're a good player. And you still have to, regardless if that team's good, regardless if you have Chipper Jones in the lineup and Andrew Jones in the lineup, you still got to be able to do what he did. And he did. And he was a great player for a long time.
Yeah, and to that point, you could say the same thing about Scott Rowland. I mean, Scott Rowland's best years, in my opinion, were with St. Louis. And, you still have to give credit to Scott Rowland for hitting the ball, but having him in the same lineup as Albert Pujols during 2004 in particular, I think that really helped him a lot.
Oh, 100% it did. But you can't fault a good player,
No.
a player for having good players around him. Does that make, like, say Mike Trout was about half as less as good, but was on a Hall of Fame pace? We go, well, he had Hunter Renfroe and a washed-up Josh Hamilton for most of his career. So even though his numbers were half as good, he's more deserving because he had a crappier lineup to play through. If that's the case, if playing with shit lineups gets you in the Hall of Fame faster because your numbers are good, then Miguel Cabrera should be unanimous because he played with a bunch of shitty teams.
I think he's unanimous regardless of how many teams he played with, John. I think he's in always anyway.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, you get 5,500 hits. He's the third guy ever, 500 homers, 600 doubles, 3,000 hits. So he's in it. I'm just saying, like, people that try to use that argument against Fred McGriff, or the fact that he was on so many different teams. I hate that argument too. Well, the guy was on so many different teams, and so no franchise ever really wanted him. How valuable could he have possibly been? It's like, get fucked. Like, the guy's numbers speak for it. It's like Gary Sheffield. Like, oh, he played on a bunch of different teams. It's like the guy had 500 homers, was one of the best hitters of the 90s, consistently put up numbers everywhere. I hate that argument with a passion.
Oh, yeah, no. And trust me, as much as I love the Hall of Fame, and I mean, granted, I haven't been there since I was like, I don't know, probably like 12 years old. It's been a while. I'd love to make that long drive again from where I am. I mean, it's only like maybe 3 or 4 hours away from where I am, something like that. I mean, New York's a pretty big state, but in any event, as much as I love the Hall of Fame, I have to be honest, it's kind of flawed. And one of the reasons that I say it's flawed is because there are certain players that I feel like should be in that are better than certain other Hall of Famers. Like I feel like the logic with all these voters just isn't great. Like, number one, I would, as much, and this is probably going to sound biased, I would have put in Don Mattingly before I put in Scott Rowland. And again, that's no disrespect to Scott Rowland, but look at their slash lines. Don Mattingly's is better than Scott Rowland. Mattingly had a 307 career batting average. Scott Rowland's was 281. The home runs, I'll give you that with Scott Rowland, but Mattingly also was considered an elite player for like a good fraction of the time that he played. And he also won 9 Gold Gloves. That's like one of the most all-time for a first baseman, and 6 All-Star appearances during the time where he was in his prime. And somehow he's not a Hall of Famer. Like, I understand the injuries killed him in the back half of his career, but I don't know, just the idea that he's not a better player than somebody like, say, a Scott Rowland or Harold Baines for matter. I think Harold Baines is like less qualified to make the Hall of Fame. I don't.
Jack Morris has the highest ERA of all time, and he's in the Hall of Fame. He has the highest ERA among all Hall of Fame pitchers. That was the biggest reason why people didn't want him in there. Or Bert Blyleven. Blyleven had given up the most home runs in MLB history, so they thought he shouldn't have been a Hall of Famer. But he eventually got in. Wasn't Mattingly on the Veterans Committee for getting voted in this one of the last 2 years?
I think this year, but he didn't end up making the cut.
I think he's kind of Dale Murphy, the AL, where their prime was as dominant was. There was nobody better than them two at that time, but their back half of their careers just absolutely mutilated, their chance to get on the Hall of Fame with the writers. I mean, maybe one day they might get in, but I think their prime was amazingly good, but out of their prime, their back half was just kind of mediocre. And I mean, there's not many players that get in solely just based on 10 years or 8 years. I mean, really the only one that comes to mind immediately is Sandy Koufax. But his prime was all-time greatest of all time, where Donnie Baseball's prime, like, he was definitely the best, but he wasn't doing like the equivalent of what Sandy Koufax did on the mound.
Right.
But I could make the case for like Lou Whitaker. Lou Whitaker, I think, has like the top 5 WAR all time among second basemen, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever how they do it. And these writers, they want to go and they're like a character clause. They try to do that bullshit and try to make it seem like everyone in the Hall of Fame was like a church boy, when that's an hour-long pod for that right there, just about the hypocrisy of the voting. And
look at Babe Ruth. He was not known as necessarily a good person, but everyone regards him as the great Bambino, just this holy grail of a baseball player. But back in those days, he was probably not somebody that people would want to, at least as a human, not look up to necessarily. And for me, Pete Rose, he's the guy that unanimously should be in without a doubt. And I think it's quite shameful what Rob Manfred has done. Him and Bud Selig not, lifting that ban. I mean, Pete Rose, I think, to me, is the ultimate hitting champion.
You're going to have to come back on because you and I need to have a conversation with that, because I got a hell of a counter to that.
Oh,
yeah. No, I'm looking forward to that, John.
Oh, boy. I want to get my popcorn ready for that if that's the case.
It's not the Hall of Good People. It's the Hall of Fame. Let's keep it in mind, all right?
I'm going to leave it as a short rebuttal because we're coming up on it on our time here. The man signed his own death wish. He lied about it for over a decade. Now he makes money about signing baseball, saying that he bet on it. So he's really not remorseful whatsoever. He's only been remorseful about it for about 15 years, and that's only because he could sign on baseballs. He agreed to the ban. He signed the ban and lied about not betting on baseball. It was a rule during the time forever. I think it's Rule 21. They talk about it every single year. So there's a difference. I understand they got all this gambling shit now that they promote on every single thing, but his banishment's a little bit different, and he didn't do much to not get his banishment lifted. Fun fact, Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays were actually banned from baseball for a couple of years because they worked at a casino. They got banned for a couple of years.
1979, I think.
Yep. But yeah, Pete Rose is a little bit of a different thing. I don't have any remorse for that guy, but that's a podcast for another time.
Yeah, and
towards that day, John, there'll be a good episode with you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and you guys pretty much know I am a militant defender of Barry Bonds. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying his on and off the field stuff were stuff that I would completely like excuse per se, but at the same time, like, if you're going to leave out the guy who are very well could have been on the list of greatest hitters of all time, and you're going to leave out a guy who for 12 consecutive years not only had 20 home runs and 20 stolen bases, but also is the only guy to be in the 500, 500, and 400 club. And this is a lot of stuff before the steroids. Something about that just does not sit right with me. And look, if you want to talk about his records being legit or not, fine, understandable. And I get that, but the guy was talented. And
bring Clemens in too. Clemens needs to go in with him.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
No, I have an article that I'm going to be writing about with regards to Barry Bonds too. So if you really want to know more about my thoughts, definitely check that out as soon as I write that over, read it over, and then publish it on the old website. But speaking of which, and as we're running short on time, obviously I got to get to the plugs. But before I do, I just want to say, Brady, thanks for hopping on the show and joining us. This was a lot of fun to have you back and talking about the Orioles for old time's sake.
Yeah, Hank, John, it's been a pleasure, And I guess no other way to close it then, as the old late and great Chuck Thompson would say, right? Ain't the beer cold, hun? I'm out.
Awesome. And we will definitely have to run it back with you for a future episode. But before we do that, I also just want to say, John, thank you again for joining me as always.
Yes, sir. Can't wait for next week. Quickest hour to sports, baby.
Yep, that it is. And folks, as always, I want to remind you guys, please don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at HFTC ETB. And, of course, follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We've got a lot of good content for you guys. You can check out 3&D, check out Fruity Cereal, and, of course, please check out the namesake of the network, because all of these are great shows and got some good content to look forward to. And last but not least, don't forget to follow our YouTube channel. Please hit that big red button down below and find us at youtube.com/ETB Network. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention to follow the website, etbpodcast.com, for great blogs and more information as well. And, of course, on behalf of Brady Reuter and John Czech, I'm Hank Indictor, and I will see you guys next week for Hitting for the Cycle.